Morning, everyone. I was telling Mark last night, you let me follow John. How do I follow John? Can we give another round of applause to John? Wonderful talk. All right, so I want to give a little bit of a history and background on why this talk. Last year, I spoke at RSA and did a deep dive on how our agile transformation happened. We were a waterfall shop a couple years ago, and then we transformed ourselves into an agile shop and then slowly embraced DevOps over the years. And that talk was about how our secure product lifecycle had to evolve and morph to suit that. So I talked about people, process, technology, but a lot of questions were around, believe it or not, the process angle that I spoke about, not just at the conference, but a lot of follow-up emails and meetings and stuff like that. So I thought, hey, there seems to be a lot of interest on this aspect. Why don't we just do a quick deep dive on just that topic? So it's not going to be about tools or automation, all of that fun stuff, but it's more around process and how large enterprises kind of can deal with that. It's not for startups or really small companies, but for really large enterprises that have process and scaling issues. Cool. All right. So I want to clarify that what this presentation is about and what's not about. This is just a case study of how PayPal's secure product lifecycle had to adapt to Agile. And it's just focused on what we call the security stories. Just like you have user stories, we have security stories. And it's going to be vendor neutral. If I mention a tool or a name of a vendor, it's by habit, and please don't treat this as an endorsement. And it's going to be descriptive, so I'm going to just say it as how it happened. I'm not going to make it very prescriptive, so your mileage may vary. And this is for large enterprises. As I mentioned earlier, this is not for really small companies. It may work, but it's best suited for solving issues of scale. All right, no way meant to be a silver bullet, neither a sales pitch. Cool. With that said, so the first few slides, I'm going to just set some context as to what our situation was when we did the transformation and so on and so forth. So if you have the context, then it kind of helps you understand the changes that we did. Cool. So here are some stats. We did not do a phased rollout of Agile. We decided to do Big Bang. Don't ask me why. We went from a project-driven to a product-aligned company. What that meant is you had a bunch of developers and testers and architects who used to come together, build something, ship it, and then they get dismantled, go do something else. But now we actually have specific products and product owners that own them and develop them, build them, iterate on them. We had 400-plus Scrum teams across the globe. It's much bigger now. And we had 500-plus change champions just driving changes across different Scrum teams in different locations. So, and every industry expert we consulted, we brought in the biggies, and they said, don't do it. Don't do it. So it was truly a who says elephants can't dance moment for us at PayPal. So, but, when the mandate is there, and we had to do it in less than a year. So I love deadlines, right? So I'm going to have some quotes of Douglas Adams. How many fans of Douglas Adams here? Excellent. So this was how we looked at it. Hey, we got less than a year, and we have to change our whole program to adapt to this. And it may not be very clear on the screen there, but there's a don't panic towel. And there's GPS coordinates of a location. Can anyone guess what that is? Okay, I'll tell you. It's in the middle of nowhere in Europe. That's where Douglas got the idea for his famous Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He was just peering at the sky, and then he got the idea. So it's in Innsbruck, somewhere in the middle of nowhere in Europe. All right, so what's SPLC all about? So that's our SDL, if you are familiar with Microsoft's parlance. So the objective here is to reduce the vulnerabilities in our products over time, not overnight, by building repeatable, sustainable, proactive security practices embedded within our product lifecycle. So for the transformation from waterfall to agile, we looked at, hey, what's our strategy going to be like? And it was very clear from the outset that we had to institutionalize risk-based thinking and process. As everyone says, we got to do that, we got to have a risk-based thinking, but how do you actually institutionalize this in every single thing that you do so that you really pay attention to the critical ones, the attention that it deserves? And how do you go secure by default at all layers, frameworks, libraries, dev tools, so on and so forth? And most importantly, automation, right? Put our bots to work. Of course, we did all of that, and when it comes to execution, obviously there's people, process, and technology. But what I'm going to focus on today is just the process aspects. How are we going to seamlessly integrate with our agile way of building and delivering products? All right, so it certainly was an exercise in testing and trusting the automated process. So we built security stories, what we call the security stories. They are dynamic, in-context security requirements. So whether you're building a web app or a mobile app, what kind of a web app, different use cases, different features, different products, different regulations, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, we had automated controls within the CI pipeline and made sure that our frameworks are secure by default, use security tools, and so on and so forth. The key difference is that we standardized all of our frameworks, and if you're building on our standardized frameworks, building run-of-the-mill web apps, we don't have to worry about you too much. We know what the security controls are, what are the features that are available automatically. Only if you go out of the way or build brand new products or product lines outside of our core stuff, we pay close attention to it if something's really brand new. So again, we're going to deep dive just on the first bullet. Yes, there's going to be a tool, but the focus is mostly on process. All right, so this is kind of a prerequisite. You have to make sure that security controls are turned on and enforced in an automated fashion throughout the CI pipeline. And the key consideration there is if we were to rely on every developer in an enterprise to do the right thing when it comes to security, every time he or she writes code, we are doomed to fail. You can never rely on human perfection. Mistakes will happen. And so we wanted to take that, we wanted to make it incredibly hard for our developers to shoot themselves in the foot when it comes to security. So we turned on all of the security controls by default across all of the layers and made developers go out of their way to turn something off. And if they did, we just failed their builds. So we hit them where it hurts most. And we were worried if they were going to embrace that, and certainly they did. If a coding error, if a functional test case fails, they take it, they know if, okay, that resulted in the build failure, so I'm going to go fix that. And the same concepts apply here too. So with this set, there's always going to be security requirements and controls that can't be automated at the framework layer. So anything that involved conscious developer actions, we wanted to provide explicit security requirements as security stories. So again, it's not an easy solve, right? So how are you going to get 500 plus Scrum teams, different technology stacks, different locations in the world adopt this? So, all right. So the holy grail for any software security professional is to make functional requirements and non-functional requirements equal citizens, or in Agile speak, how do you make user stories and security stories equal citizens? So the analogy that I've used there is that you have your tax laws that have become complex over the years, and you can see the mountain pile of books that equates to the federal tax code on the left. But how many of you actually go read all of that before you file your taxes? All you use is your favorite tax software, a wizard that automates that. So we want to do something like that. We didn't want our developers to go read 200 plus security standards that we have and actually understand which ones apply to the product that they build, how to properly do it, and so on and so forth. They're all static PDF documents sitting on a portal somewhere. So we didn't want our developers to go do that. So the approach that we took was we got a simple web-based tool that plugs into our quarterly release planning process, completely aligned with that. And it's a simple survey that does lightweight threat modeling and then generates security stories and places them into the backlog for every Scrum team that's working on it. So they have their user stories in their backlog, and then they have their security stories. They can prioritize and put them into the right sprints and work on them. And all of the tracking and reporting was from our application lifecycle management tool, so that there's complete transparency and visibility to our product developers. Some of our initial goals, from the outset, we were clear that we, as an InfoSec professionals, have to go to where our developers are rather than asking them to come to us. So on a day in and day out basis, they are looking at our ALM tool where their user stories are sitting. So we're pretty clear that we had to go there. So we built a two-way sync so that when they complete and accept a security story, we automatically get notified about it, and our dashboards updated, and so did their dashboards. So for tracking and reporting, obviously. And then we decided that this has to be super fast. We can't afford to make a super long questionnaire that would be incredibly complex for folks to fill out. They would just lose. Just look at any survey that goes on and on. How many of you actually complete it? You just click through. So we didn't want that to happen. So our goal was to make sure that the survey is completed within 15 minutes, and most of our developers do it in 5 minutes. And the reason for that was we took our core frameworks and we modeled them. So we know all of the security attributes of those frameworks. So we automatically answered a bunch of questions about those frameworks. So it literally took them 5 minutes to complete a survey. And we made sure that we actually have generic guidelines. So if they're not building on our standardized frameworks, they can still implement good security controls, really actionable security controls. And that's kind of our design goals. So we started with that, and we implemented the system. So I've been talking about security stories, and one of the big questions was, like, what makes a good security story? A good security story has to be actionable, and it should be a bite-sized chunk that can be completed by any developer or a tester. And it should have clear usage guidelines, and it should be all about your own custom APIs and frameworks and libraries that you have at your company. Thou shall encode thy output doesn't cut it. So where needed, you should provide reusable code snippets, secure configuration examples, and so on and so forth, so that a developer can look at it here, copy, paste it, and move on with life. And it should completely speak developer lingo. don't let any security lingo be there. You should completely be able to connect with your developers, which means no APT terms there. And you should have a well-defined acceptance criteria so that they know if it's done properly. And even better, for some of the stories, you can actually automate the acceptance criteria using different tools that you may have within the CI pipeline. And call out what are the stories that needs to be performed every sprint versus what's one time. All in all, the key objective here is that you probably have a small set of AppSec experts sitting within information security in your company, and they themselves can't scale very well. So what you're trying to solve here is the problem of scale. So if they have to reach out for clarifications and questions for each of the security stories to your AppSec team, that's a failed strategy. So make sure, pay close attention to what goes in there. It should be self-service, 100%. I call it zero touch. Once you put that in place, nobody should be pinging you asking for clarifications and questions. If that's happening, you're failing. Go fix that. All right. So what were the gotchas? And again, Douglas Adams comes to mind. We made some mistakes along the way, and we corrected quickly. Retrospective, and we were an agile team ourselves. So we quickly tested a few things, did A/B testing, gathered feedback, and fixed stuff. So what were the gotchas? Trying to overload your developers with a ton of security stories is not going to work. They have limited time, limited bandwidth. So just focus on your top 10. Not OWASP top 10 necessarily. They may align, they may not align. Figure out what's your top 10, and then write stories that can solve those top 10. If you can do it in an automated fashion using your frameworks and stuff, that's better. But if you can't, just make sure you focus on them. Don't try to boil the ocean. And then if there's any guidance that could potentially change, let's say you're building something and you're from a security perspective and you're releasing, and if that guidance is going to change next quarter, you're adding more features, more APIs available for your developers, don't try to hard code that within the tool. Instead, see if you can hyperlink it so that they always get the right latest guidance. And then prioritize every story. So if they don't know what's more important and what's not so very important, it's going to be tricky for them to prioritize. So just bucket every story as high, medium, low, and mandate, when you start out, just mandate that they complete the high priority stories. That's key. And then it's really important to get the culture going rather than trying to, again, boil the ocean. And then expect security stories to be moved around in your ALM tools. So let's say one of the stories goes into a backlog of a specific team. Maybe there is a reorg. Maybe it's a shared project between multiple Scrum teams, and they want to assign it to somebody else. Make sure that the syncing that you're building would actually support that kind of a use case, and that way you don't get into such operational issues once you launch them. All right, so how does it look like? So here's the questionnaire. As you can see, there are 6 sections, and each section has a bunch of subsections, and each subsection has a question. If you were to pick a profile, there's a profile screen right before that. Most of the questions would be auto-answered so that you can quickly answer what you're trying to build, what feature you're trying to build in that specific product. So once you do that, one of the key questions that I want to highlight is, I'm not sure if it's very visible there on the screen. The question says, what PayPal framework are you developing on? And we have our own custom frameworks listed there. So if you pick one, we know what automated security controls are available. Does it automatically take care of XSS? Does it automatically take care of CSRF, and so on and so forth? So we don't assign those stories then. You get a minimal set of stories that really aren't available or that are really specific to your product that you're building, or product or feature that you're building. then. And here's how a guidance would look like. You actually have a configuration example that a developer just can copy and paste into their app. And boom, they now have that control. So it should be as simple as that, really, really actionable. And we have an automated check within our CI pipeline to go look at that config.json to see if that's actually being done. So how do you measure success? Obviously, there are a couple things. I like to see them as adoption and efficacy. So you want to make sure that all of your PD teams actually embrace the tool and use it. But it's not just about adoption, it's also about efficacy. So all of the security stories that get put in the backlog are folks working on it, and are your automated tests coming out with good results, with no high-risk issues found? Are they getting completed and accepted on time? So those are the things that you want to track. So we built a metrics portal to be able to track all of that stuff, so that we can actually nail down and see which parts of the organization are having difficulties. And if yes, we go figure out what's going on and actually give them the little nudge so that they adopt the tool and actually see the benefits. And again, one of the key things for me is if they get engaged early and have all of the security requirements, most likely we're not going to stop them at the last minute saying that you have a bunch of security holes. So how many projects did we stop from going live because they had security issues? So that's a big number for us, and it was pretty close to zero. Again, a quote from our Android app teams manager. So he says, it's great that the pen test found no blockers, and I have to attribute that to our secure product lifecycle. So that's great feedback to hear from your product developers. Make their life easy, invest in automation, and help them plan and execute tasks. So, in a nutshell, we had a bunch of PDFs and HTML documents providing all of our security standards, sitting somewhere on a portal. We still have them, mind you, but it's all about giving context-aware, the ones that are really pertinent to the feature or product that's getting built to the developers in an easily digestible fashion and make it actionable. And going from manual gates in the waterfall world to automated gates within the CI pipeline. And human involvement where we had the luxury of time to where we rely on our frameworks and tools to do the heavy lifting, and humans get involved only for non-standard, high-risk, brand new stuff that we're working on. And again, threat model everything to automated, lightweight threat modeling for run-of-the-mill stuff, right? If you're building run-of-the-mill web apps on our standard frameworks, we know what you're doing, and we can provide some standard assurance from our frameworks and tools. Any questions? Mark, do we have a mic for the questions? There are two mics on each side. Yes.
You were talking about automation of...
Can you speak up?
Yes. You were talking about automation of security tests, which is mostly about automation, as I understand it, automation of the security requirements into the agile DevOps stories. Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate on the actual automation of the testing itself, validating code, infrastructure? Is that part of the automation, or it's only about the...
It certainly was part of our automation, but I spoke about it in my previous RSA talk. If you want to go take a look at that slide deck, you certainly can, and we can chat later. But this talk is mostly about the process. So both of them have to be present, and they work hand in hand. You just can't rely on this. Yeah.
Thank you, Laksh. A great presentation. Can you share the process that you have put in place for the offshore teams to be security aware?
Well, we have multiple development locations, and all of them follow the same product lifecycle. And so it's from that point, it's easy for us to plug security into where we want. They use the same standard tools to build and ship deploy code. So if you have a standard unified process, which is critical for a large company, right? Otherwise, it's really hard for you to track what's going on and make sure things get delivered on time and so on and so forth. So we just plug into our product lifecycle, plug into standard tools that our developers use. Of course, there are exceptions because we actually have a lot of acquisitions that happen over time, and they start out on their own, and then we slowly integrate them into our key frameworks and stuff like that. But overall, just having a standard unified process makes it easy for them to adopt the tool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. Great presentation. Thank you. How about outsourced development? I mean, I work for a big company, and we do most of our software development outsourced. So we're really struggling to get this concept in our outsourcing beyond just procurement terms and conditions.
Yeah. We actually don't outsource a lot of our development. The vast majority of our core products are built by our own developers. But I would say that, it kind of goes back to the previous answer. Having a unified product lifecycle is very, very key. Without that, it's really hard for you to track and report on. So if you have vendors building stuff for you, make them comply to your processes. Put that in the contract, enforce it. Then they can leverage and use their own tooling, for not just for building, but also actually plan capacity, assign story points for all of the security stories that you're generating, so that they can build security into the product rather than trying to bolt it on later, which never works.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Laksh, for a great presentation. I had some questions regarding that 15-minute survey that you said that you have your developers fill out. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What does that actually look for in that risk survey?
So we actually look for, of course, the key question is the profile. What standard framework are you building on? Whether it's a web framework, web app framework, web API framework, or a mobile app, and so on and so forth. What programming languages do you use? What class of data are you touching? We have a data classification within PayPal, whether it's sensitive, PII data or credit card information, or it's just class 4 or 5 data, which is public or internal. So the controls that apply based on all of these attributes change. So we can. So it's basically about what features you're trying to build and what type of data you're handling, so that we can provide you with the right set of guidance.
Is there a generic one that you can share with us?
Sorry?
A generic survey that you can share with us?
Unfortunately, it isn't. If you can remember, the survey has to be very, very specific to your developers. It should speak your lingo. If it's generic enough, developers won't connect with it. It has to, like for us, it speaks PayPal lingo. Talks everything about PayPal, so that it's easy for developers to understand and implement. I know we're running short of time. We have one question.
Thank you.
We'll just kind of follow up on that a bit. So with that survey, where does that happen in your SDLC? The big challenge being design, because with Agile, you're iteratively designing as you go through it. So your user stories are going to change in your approach. So how do you adapt for that?
Good question. Good question. So again, I talked about our quarterly planning process. So every quarter, we do the quarterly planning process where it's called as the multi-sprint planning, where we look at all of the features and products that have to get built in the quarter that follows. So that's when we inject this tool, and so they know what products they're going to build, what features they're going to build, on what frameworks. And as part of that process, they can actually answer the survey, generate the security stories, put it into the backlog, and now they have all of the stories that they need, both user and security, to work on the next quarter. And then they split it and work on it. So it boils down to having such a process in your organization. All right, great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Raghavan.